Matthew 25, 1 through 13. If you've been doing Bible readings with us, we've been reading Proverbs and now Ecclesiastes. And it keeps asking the question, who are the wise ones? The one who fears God and keeps his commandment. That wise ones are still coming to Jesus. And we have this scene, this question that comes up on whether we have oil and whether we're really wise. Now this is in a section in Matthew 24. The disciples come out of the temple with Jesus and they say, hey, Jesus, this is great. Ooh, what a wonderful place. And he says, I tell you, there won't be one stone left upon another pretty soon. Temple's coming down, fixing to be destruction time. Judgment's on its way to Jerusalem. And then late in the chapter, he shifts from the destruction of the temple and starts talking about opportunities to come into the kingdom. And that those opportunities are going to come to an end as well. And really, that's the whole point of this morning's lesson. A moment is coming. There is a time coming when you won't be able to choose Jesus anymore. We don't think about that a lot. There is a time coming when the urgency will be over and no longer will you be able to accept Jesus. Now, the story right before the one we're going to talk about has some men that are left in charge of some things. And the master comes back too soon and they weren't ready for the master to come. And so they're condemned because they were being slothful. They weren't getting ready for the master to come. But in our story in Matthew 25, 1 through 13, the parable is about 10 virgins with two options. And so we have these 10 virgins and they have two options. And that's the scene. And so he uses females here. And in this story, the problem isn't that Jesus comes too soon. The problem is that he delays. He doesn't come fast enough. And so they're not ready for this moment. They've lost out on their opportunity. It's a strange little story. I'll tell you a little about marriages in their day. The virgins fit into the marriage story well. Usually the bride would have an entourage a little bit. They would go sort of gather around the city gate. And the bride would be at her mom's house and the groom would come and then the trumpet would sort of sound. Everybody would say, the groom's on his way. And the virgins would have their lamps. And oftentimes in their day, they used torches that were wrapped in special fabric. And the torches were passed from generation to generation. In Jesus' telling of this story, he uses lamps. But they would fire up their lamps and it was almost always at midnight. So midnight is not a strange thing. They would fire up those lamps and they would lead the procession of the bride the groom to the bride's house. They would make the contract. He would be taking the things that were required for the relationship to be consummated between his parents and her parents. And then he would receive the bride and they would travel back through and go to either his house, which wasn't too common. Normally he was going back to his mom and dad's place. And so he would go back to their house with his bride. So that was the normal setup for how marriages sort of worked in Jesus' day. And largely they still act that way in that part of the world today. They're much the same, where the scene will look the same. An agreement will be made between a set of parents. The bride will come through and the groom will come through and receive his bride. They'll go back to his house or his parents' house. So I don't want you to get lost in the minutia of the story. Parables are usually destroyed because we try to get too much out of them. Don't destroy this parable. He's only making one point. There is a moment coming when it will be too late to accept Jesus. That's what the parable's about. Matthew 25, 1. Then the kingdom of heaven will be comparable to 10 virgins who took their lamps and went out to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish, and 5 were prudent. And when the foolish took their lamps, they took no oil with them. But the prudent took oil in flasks along with their lamps. Now, while the bridegroom was delaying, they all got drowsy and began to sleep. But at midnight, there was a shout, "Behold, the bridegroom, come out to meet him." Then all those virgins rose and trimmed their lamps. And the foolish said to the prudent, "Give us some of your oil, for our lamps are going out." But the prudent answered, "No, there will not be enough for us and you. Go instead to the dealers and buy some for yourselves." And while they were going away to make the purchase, the bridegroom came, and those who were ready went in with him to the wedding feast, and the door was shut. Later, the other virgins also came, saying, "Lord, Lord, open up to us." But he answered, "Truly I say to you, I do not know you. Be on the alert then, for you do not know the day nor the hour." You don't know the day nor the hour. Be on the alert. It's interesting that Jesus uses 5 thinkers and 5 morons in his story. And those are literally the words that he uses. We don't think about it, but in Greek, it's the word moron, the fools, the foolish one. It is moria. It's the word we get moron from. And the thinker there is not wisdom. It's not Sophia. It is using their minds. It's a word about their minds. 5 of them are thinkers and 5 of them are morons. That sounds a little cruel and crass in our world, but they're all going to meet the bridegroom, and some are just not prepared. They didn't engage. They didn't get ready. You know how it is when suddenly you have to be prepared. Most of you live in a time when you don't prepare quite the same way. Marlene's from Washington State. We would travel back to see her folks a lot. I remember back almost 50 years ago, 45 years, 5, we started traveling up that way. There were lots of places between here and Washington where you carried an extra can of fuel because you couldn't get from where you were to where you needed to be without carrying some extra with you. You'd run out of gas. There wasn't a service station, and your car may not have gotten that good of mileage. And we always had a can of gas with us. Usually we were in a pickup. Sometimes we had a trailer with us. Sometimes we just hung a can of gas on the bumper. I mean, you carried gas wherever you had to. It was better than running out of gas. I don't know what to make of these that are going to go into this wedding feast with Jesus. They just aren't prepared. And they almost are. They start to get ready, and then they have to go and make last minute. Well, they think they can make last minute preparations, and it's too late. I thought it would be okay. I thought we'd be all right. No, it's too late. The bridegroom comes. Isn't that a final verse? The bridegroom comes, and they travel to the place, and the door is shut. That's the point of this parable. There is a moment coming when the door will be shut and you can't get in. And you can stand at the door and pound, "Lord, Lord, let us in." And Jesus says, I don't know you. The moment is past. I liked Damon's word last week for preparedness around the Lord's Supper. I like thinking about some of the thoughts that you've had this morning. People doing things that aren't wise. People writing books with 200 excuses about how there is no God. The Bible can't be true. And God stands up to that scrutiny. He stands up to that. And in Jesus' little lesson on these 5 wise virgins and the 5 foolish ones, he helps us understand that we need to be ready. I'm thankful for the conversions that have been this last week. I'm thankful for hearts that are turning to Jesus. It's regular at this time of year. We have concentrated Christian time We're not going into the schools. We're not going to work some. We stay together. We spend time. We concentrate our efforts and talk about Jesus more. That yeasting and that energy starts to come, and people say, I haven't made a decision yet. I need to make a decision. Now is the time I need to choose. There is a moment when it'll be too late to come to Jesus. I don't know when that's going to be. He talks about when the destruction of Jerusalem is going to occur. And then he says, as Merrick read in scripture reading this morning, of that day and hour no one knows, not even the Son of Man. He's not talking about the day of Jerusalem, the destruction there. Jesus knew what day that was going to be. He's talking about even I don't know when the end comes, when there won't be any more opportunity. As long as the day is, it is a day of salvation. Today is the day of salvation. Don't let the opportunity pass you by. Don't fail to accept Jesus. Don't fail to claim him. And these may have claimed some relationship, but hadn't lived it somehow. Again, don't destroy the parable by overanalyzing it. Just be sure and hear that simple message. There was a moment when the bridegroom came, and those that were ready went in with him, and those that were not prepared had the door shut on them. And don't let your preparation moment get away. If you're ready today, what a moment. Are you ready is the song you're about to sing. It is the simple application. Yes, I'm ready. I'm ready to come to Jesus. Are you ready for the day Jesus will come, or are you not prepared yet? Your take home, if Jesus came right now, is there some last minute preparation you'd like to make? Maybe you have a relationship you'd like to restore. Don't hesitate to pick up the phone, make a call. Preacher said something this morning made me think about you. Well, what was that? He said, we don't always have time to make up. I want to make up. I want to restore a relationship. Confessing a sin that you struggle with. Oh, I thought I'd get that under control. I thought I'd handle that, so I haven't let Jesus deal with it. Maybe you need to confess that sin today. Be prepared for that moment. Maybe you're seeking his washing and baptism. I want to be cleansed. I want to repent of not believing that Jesus is the Christ and confess that I now believe Jesus is the Christ and plead with God to wash me and make me whiter than snow. We need to be prepared. Little parable, 13 verses, 1 point. Don't be a moron. Time is running out. If you need to come to Jesus, come now. Together we stand and sing.